Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, November the 15th, 2023. Today I want to talk about Iceland, but I'm not going to talk about it in any great detail because I don't really know much about Iceland, and I've only been there once, and that was for about a couple of hours. I spent a couple of hours in Reykjavik airport. It was really miserable. It was raining, and yeah, it was hardly an airport. It felt more like an aerodrome. But anyway, I can say that I have been to Iceland, but yeah, I didn't see anything of it. It did seem pretty miserable from the point of view looking out of the windows of the airport waiting room, waiting for a connecting flight. So looking at the news, there's been sort of earthquakes, volcanoes, that kind of stuff going on. And people are worried in one particular part of Iceland. And I just quickly wanted to look at what was going on. And I thought that was an opportunity also to look at the problems of the Placidus house system. Because when you look at charts set in Iceland, you often see that the Placidus house system is breaking down. And that will be an argument for using a different house system, for example, the whole sign house system. So I will be looking at that as well. But before I look at Iceland, I want to look at the astrology for today, which is Wednesday, November the 15th, 2023. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, November the 15th. What's going on? Probably the main thing going on is an exact sextile between Mercury and Venus. You see there's Mercury at noon in New York, at 8:8 Sagittarius. There's Venus at 8:4 Libra. They're in sextile. It's a great aspect. Mercury and Venus as a pair are to do with talent, with artistic endeavor, being clever, with business skills. And, that makes sense because the sextile is a fortunate aspect. The sextile is slightly different from a trine. It's not quite as lazy as a trine. Reason being because a sextile is kind of 2 times 3. So 2 is a number of, because a sextile is a 6 of the circle. So 6 is 2 times 3. So 3 is the ease of the trine, but 2 is a bit of conflict, bit of an edge there. So we have to try a little bit with a sextile, just enough, to give it some dynamism. And so with the Mercury-Venus sextile, we are challenged in the most gentle way to make the most of our talents, whatever skills we have. We can bring them out into the open because Mercury is about intelligence. Venus is a planet related to art, but it's also connected with other people, so we can tell people about what we can do, and I think in most cases we're going to get an enthusiastic response. So don't be modest about your creative and artistic skills, because now really is a time to bring them out into the open. Now that's certainly good news, that Mercury-Venus sextile. On a more challenging note, note that at noon in New York, the Sun and Venus are exactly at 45 degrees, exactly 45 degrees apart. Now, this 45-degree angle, because the Sun and Venus are moving at very close, similar speeds, has been around for some time. But today it is exact, and the Sun the Sun is quite an assertive planet. Of course, I understand it's not a planet; it's a sun. But in astrology, we call it a planet. The Sun is an assertive planet. It's about our identity, and Venus, by contrast, is about relating and whatever. So don't push it too hard. Don't be too assertive. Don't be too pushy. Particularly now when the Sun at the same time is starting to make a conjunction with Mars. We mustn't be too headstrong because relationships are important. We need to keep on good terms with all the people around us, our friends, family, colleagues, etc. So don't push that. And one should point out that the Sun and Venus are on two midpoints. Two major midpoints. They're on the Mars-Uranus midpoint and on the Mercury-Jupiter midpoint. Now, that Mars-Uranus midpoint relates to the Mars-Uranus opposition and to the full moon we had. That was like, on Monday when we had all that massive, massive lineup with Sun, Moon, Mars, Uranus. But it's still there. This is not. We're not over that new moon. That was a new moon on Monday. We're not over that new moon, and having the Sun and Venus on the Mars-Uranus midpoint still is just a reminder that we have to be careful, that there can still be explosive events, that relationships should not be taken for granted. You might think you and someone else are getting on fine, but it just takes one mistake for everything to blow up. On a more positive note, though, Sun and Venus are on the Mercury, are aspecting the Mercury-Jupiter midpoint. And so that is pretty fortunate. Mercury is the planet of communication. Jupiter is about optimism, expansion. So we really can get our message across. So we should focus not on the Mars-Uranus, on the argument, but we should think about the connections we have with the people around us and getting that message across, and that ties in with the Mercury-Venus sextile. So if we can navigate today's astrology, steer clear of the arguments, fights. Don't get too caught up in your ego. Focus on what makes focus on the similarities between you and your fellow human beings, and shared creative pursuits. And I think for most of us it can be an okay day. Now, as far as my forecast for the 12 signs are concerned, here they are. These are my forecasts for today, which is Wednesday, November the 15th, 2023. Aries, there is a temptation to just move on. You've seen something, you now want to see something else. But maybe you should hang around for a bit longer. There are things going on that you can take advantage of, and you can benefit from particular people, but you do have to give them a chance. Taurus, you know what to say. At first sight, your remarks might not seem very exciting or inspired, but you are making important points. You're also showing the world how very talented you are. So stick with it and make the most of your insights, because right now you understand something that everyone else is missing. Gemini, Mercury, your ruling planet, is making a sextile aspect to Venus. You express yourself extremely well, and you can show poise and grace. You can also create a situation where your abilities are having a direct impact on the people around you. They know what you can do, and they want to be part of it. Cancer. There are lots of things to do, but you may not feel that you're accomplishing much. But don't worry, you're making progress, and you're also clarifying your ideas. And once you've got your ideas sorted out, you'll be able to communicate them. Works of art and creativity take a long time to take shape, but that doesn't mean that they're not worth the effort. Leo, there are things making you annoyed, not crazy annoyed, but it's still troubling. Perhaps you should address the issue now, in a gentle, low-profile kind of way. Because over the next few days, the annoyances are likely to increase. On the plus side, your many skills are in plain sight, and if you keep your cool, your reputation can get a boost. Virgo, you're feeling comfortable. A lot of things have been sorted out, and things that stressed you out not so long ago are slipping into the background. You're also helped by your capacity for good organisation, and perhaps you're benefiting from what you've done in the past. Someone finds you interesting. Libra. Venus, your ruler, continues moving through your star sign where it's aspected by Mercury. You're on good form, and with the right words and gestures, you'll have everyone eating out of your hand. But someone is under the weather, or perhaps something is bothering them. It seems that there's something you can do to help. Scorpio, some new pressure is creeping in. You feel that something has to be done and that it won't wait. There is no immediate hurry, but perhaps you need to give consideration to your next move. Elsewhere, people are busy talking to each other, and it's probably a good idea to work out what they're talking about. Sagittarius, you don't have to do everything on your own. After all, Mercury is moving through your star sign in aspect to Venus. Whatever you're doing, assistance is available, and your friends and colleagues are a valuable resource. If you're looking for new relationships, then someone is on the horizon, while existing relationships can greatly improve. Capricorn, you know things that other people don't know, and this puts you at an advantage, not just in career and business, but also in your social life. But the question is, how do you use your knowledge, and to what extent do you reveal what you know? There are some things that you can be open about, but the fundamental workings of the matter need to be kept to yourself, I think. Aquarius, you have to deal with the world in the right way. It's about being friendly, but also keeping a bit of distance and not getting too closely involved with any one person. Everyone has got something to offer, and you don't want to restrict yourself to one particular scene. Also, you don't want to be in a situation where you become a reluctant problem solver with no reward at the end. Pisces, there's no need to try too hard. In most cases, you've done what you have to do, even if the environment still seems very hectic, though perhaps you just want to look busy, for reasons best known to yourself. Still, you can learn from the events around you, and in particular, you can learn by watching other people's behaviour. So I'm now going to move on to the I Ching, and as always, I ask the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those of you watching this video? So the first hexagram I got was the same hexagram as I got yesterday, 63 after completion. This is a situation, like I said yesterday, where something is finished. It seems that we've crossed to the other side of the river. You know, the image here is that, we've got a river to cross. After completion means it's done. We've completed the task. And it seems fine. But there is also a certain feeling that once it's completed, that's when the decay starts setting in. Very often the decay starts setting in the moment things have reached their peak. Once something is done, we start to see things start to disintegrate a bit. And there are a lot of moving lines here. And so, we have the second line from the bottom moves. There is some of us might feel actually that we've, in the process of crossing a river, in the process of completing a task, we've given something up, or even that we've lost something. Where is it? we feel we've lost an opportunity, or we may have lost some money, or we may have lost an object, or we maybe feel someone owes us some money and we might be a bit panicked about it. The I Ching does tell us that we're going to get it back, and there's no need to go over the top trying to get it back. In most cases, of course, there's no excuse for being lazy. But in certain situations, if we're worried that something, we've lost an opportunity or lost something more tangible, don't worry. We will get it back. Now, yesterday, when we had this hexagram, the fourth line moved. The fourth line again moves today. And I'll say the same thing about that. The fourth line means everything is fine, everything's great, but we just notice something. We notice the first signs of decay. No one else notices it. We do. We can see that things are not right. Our gut feeling tells us there's a problem, and there is a problem. It may not manifest for days, weeks, months, years, but there is a problem. We have to work out, what are we going to do? Are we just going to accept that it's going to be, that this is a state of, whatever, however wonderful things are, it's all going to disintegrate? I mean, that's the way of things, isn't it? Nothing lasts forever. Or perhaps we need to take some action there. Perhaps we need to see if we can arrest the decay, prepare for the decay, or especially if it affects us personally. We need to see what we can do. To resolve that issue. And the last line moves as well, the top line. And that's about your head going underwater. The whole thing is just, remember, we're crossing a river. Yes, we crossed a river, but still we could get our head wet. So what do? We might suddenly at some stage find ourselves in difficulty. Hopefully not literal difficulty, like really crossing a river and water up to our nostrils or whatever. But what do we do? Well, the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching advises us that we can't just hang around and look back and sort of wonder what to do. We need to keep ploughing on, because we can't go back. We can't hesitate. The water's rising. We need to keep moving on. And so that is the recommendation there, but I must emphasize I'm talking in a symbolic language. If you really do find yourself in that situation, I don't know. I just don't ford rivers today. That's avoid flood zones, that kind of thing. But I'm sure that will be fine. Okay, so this hexagram, it does move, and it moves to hexagram 10, which is treading on the tiger's tail. We're dealing with a dangerous situation, so there's a continuation there, particularly from that last line of the previous hexagram 63. We're in deep water here. And then we go to this idea about being right next to a tiger. Yeah, we have to tread carefully. But this big threat, this tiger, may not actually be as scary as it seems. This tiger just watches us, and the I Ching says even if it bites us, it's not the end of the world. We'll get through it. So we just need to respect the fact that we're dealing in a dangerous situation. Be firm. That was the last line of 63. We don't hesitate. Just keep moving. Keep your head. Don't panic, and then we can get round this obstacle and come through unscathed. Okay, so that's the I Ching, and I now want to finish by talking about Iceland. I don't want to spend long on Iceland. I'm not going to say anything dramatic about the subject of Iceland. I'm not going to make any predictions about Iceland. I just want to very quickly look at some of the charts relating to Iceland. So we will start with Iceland's chart for independence. This is its natal chart. I mean, I think there are other charts, June the 17th, 1944 at 2 p.m. I've always thought it rather unfair that Iceland got its independence in 1944 because, if you like, the colonial power, although it was under British control, it was under British or an American control. The British invaded Iceland in May the 10th, 1940. There was one casualty, which was, I think, a British soldier committed suicide en route, but that was it. Then I think they handed over to the Canadians, or maybe in the end the Americans, and so forth. So the Danes were not really in a position to do anything about Iceland declaring independence because Denmark was under German occupation at the time. So this is a chart. I'm not really going to say much about it. Apparently 2 p.m. There's, I don't know. I notice there's no water in this chart except the North Node. Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio. Does that suggest a lack of emotion? No, of course it doesn't. It's the way one expresses one's emotions. Does this mean that the Icelandic people are quite reserved? They don't really work fundamentally on an emotional level? I don't know. I mean, you can't categorize people like these. This is a huge generalization, but I'm just speculating. And of course, I like generalizations because that's what astrologers like to do. So in terms of solar arc direction, so at the moment, there seems to be a big problem in this area of southwest Iceland. It's probably not a big deal, really, but people are talking about these thousands of mini earthquakes and a volcano and whatever. So I just thought I'd look at the astrology of the thing. So what's happening to Iceland? I looked at the solar arc directions for the June the 17th, 1944 chart. So inside is the Iceland chart, outside is the solar arc directions chart. There are two things that came to mind. You can see solar arc directed Venus is square, coming up to a square of Uranus. I suppose. I mean, I suppose one might say Venus square Uranus might be some kind of earthquake. I mean, Uranus is the planet of earthquakes, so that's certainly possible. I'm not saying that is in particular a particularly big deal in itself. We would need to see. We would need to see some confirmation of that. We also see, and I don't really want to put a great deal of store on this because it's a sextile. With solar arc directions, normally this is solar arc directions. You use conjunctions, oppositions, squares, semisquares. You don't use, at least I don't use soft aspects in general. But I suppose one could point out that solar arc directed Uranus at 26.3 Leo is almost exactly sextile the natal sun. So that is the so that's one thing to consider. So that's solar arc directions. Then I was thinking about the new moon, because on Monday's new moon was new moon was opposition Uranus. That has earthquakes written all over it. So what happened? What about the new moon when you set it for Iceland? So let's. So that's a new moon that was on Monday, set for New York. So let's relocate it. Let's relocate it for Grindavik. Now, Grindavik, on that little map, you can see that little red Google map, Google's marker for where it is. So it's kind of on the west of the island. So possibly something going on there, because that new moon set for Iceland, or at least set for Grindavik, has an ascendant of 1619 Scorpio. You can see the moon is at 20 Scorpio, and Uranus at 21 Scorpio. So it is across the ascendant. So that might hint, and it's not just the moon, it's the sun and Mars. So this sun, moon, Mars is pretty close to Iceland's ascendant, and Uranus is on the descendant. Now we can actually do an astrocartography of that. So if you see, this is Iceland, and you can see, well, this is Iceland for the lunation. This line here, you see this big red line here, is actually Neptune. So there is where the earthquakes and volcanoes close to Reykjavik. So this is on the other side of the island. The exact place where the new moon would be exactly on the ascendant is these yellow lines here. So it's a bit off western Iceland, but this Neptune opposition, conjunct the IC, may be relevant, because we can see in this chart for this lunation that Neptune, there's the IC at 2050, and there's Neptune at 25 Pisces. So there's something going on. You've got not just the new moon on the ascendant set for Grindavik, but you've sort of also got Neptune on the IC. But it's not exact, and I'm unconvinced that one could sort of look at that chart and say, oh well, there's going to be an earthquake in Iceland, or I don't think you could necessarily say that. Then you might want to look at this is the full moon just before all these eruptions in Iceland. If you're into Charon, which I'm not particularly, you might notice that Charon set for Grindavik is at 1654 Aries, so it's exactly square Iceland's the ascendant. So maybe there's something going on again if you're into Charon. But why stop at Charon? I suppose you could look at lots of other asteroids and always find something that's square the ascendant. But still, maybe that's interesting. Finally, there is the Libra Ingress. So in a Libra Ingress, that would be, the theory would be that if you take the chart of when the sun goes into Libra at the end of September, that will, for the place on Earth you're interested in, that might tell you about the next 3 months. So looking at the Libra Ingress chart for Grindavik, again, Pluto is on the ascendant. So Pluto is square the ascendant. So the full moon Charon was square the ascendant. Pluto here was square the ascendant. I mean, it's interesting, but just looking at this astrology, I'm not convinced that we're seeing anything really spectacular, particularly as we're looking at it in hindsight. I don't think, on the basis of what I'm looking at, we could have predicted major geological problems in Iceland, because, yeah, sure, it fits, but probably these things are going to happen quite regularly, and we don't even know how serious this thing is. Now, one point I do want to make about this chart, if you use the Placidus house system, this is the 12th house. This is the 12th house cusp. It's at 27-25 Capricorn. You can see quarter of the chart is in the 12th house. Now, and you can see that it's breaking down so much that on this astrology software you can't read the numbers anymore. It's all breaking down. So having a 12th house, having a 12th house that huge, or a 6th, I look at the 6th house, a 12th and a 6th house, obviously the 12th, the opposite house is always the same size. Uh, that's ridiculous. And so you can see that what's happening, because as you move north, the house system is starting to break down. And it has become increasingly popular to use whole sign houses. And I think this chart for the Libra Ingress, regardless of what it means, with that massive 12th house, massive 6th house, that's a strong argument here for not using the Placidus house systems. And you could say, oh, well, don't use the Placidus house systems in Iceland, but it's okay to use them in London or New York. But I don't know, one wants to be consistent. I will carry on using the Placidus house system as my main house system, but I do accept that there is a strong argument for using whole sign houses, and I think this chart really does illustrate it. Okay, that's all I'm going to say for today. Thank you for listening. I hope everything's fine in Iceland and that we don't see any more problems. Astrology, in hindsight, shows us that something was going on, but as I said, in hindsight. But yeah, I hope everything's okay in Iceland and that they managed that there aren't any more serious earthquakes, eruptions, etc. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.